The Art Dealer Diaries are brought to you by Medicine Man Gallery, located for over 26 years in Tucson, Arizona, specializing in antique Native American art, early Western art, including the famed Maynard Dixon, as well as modern art. You can find everything online at medicinemangallery.com. There's over 6,000 objects to select from. Also, the Charles Bloom Murder Mystery Series, written by yours truly, me, Mark Sublette. There's 6 books in this series, and they follow the protagonist Charles Bloom through all the intrigue of the art world set in Santa Fe and the Navajo Nation. These can be found on Audible, eBooks, Amazon, and of course, the gallery at medicinemangallery.com. Had a great talk today, very fun with Charles King. And Charles is a dealer in Pueblo pottery, mainly contemporary pottery, and an expert in Tony Day, as well as really almost all the Pueblo potters that are working the last 40 years. And really interesting because, I didn't know this, but he grew up in a family that had a trading post in Colorado, so he learned at a very young age about pottery and the potters. And so we had a great talked about Richard Spivey as well as Tony Day, Maria, and some of the other great contemporary artists of today. If you like Pueblo pottery, you will be listening to this one. I have Charles King today on the Art Dealer Diaries. Charles is one of the pillars, I think, of our business and has been doing this. How long have you been doing this now, Charles?
I've had the gallery about 23 years. Grew up, my folks had a space in Estes Park, a gallery up there when I was growing up.
What was that called?
Serendipity.
Oh.
So it was just right downtown in Estes Park. So I grew up there. They had that starting in maybe about 81 or 82. So I started, kind of helping them out when I was in high school and buying inventory and meeting all the artists. So I've been kind of at it for a long time.
Yeah, a very long time. So let's actually start there. Where did you grow up?
Estes Park.
So you Colorado. Grew up in Estes Park, and they had, would you consider it a trading post?
It was more a jewelry shop, and then as I got older, I was really interested in pottery and fetishes, so we started getting more of that in. So it was a little bit of everything across the board.
And so you worked in Serendipity from day one, kind of?
Yeah, so as soon as they bought it, I started working there in the summers. It was better than having to work in the local hamburger restaurant.
Yeah. And so did you find there was something right off the bat that you like? Because, you're known for Pueblo pottery. That's your thing. And you don't really deviate from that because you have a real love for it, and that's fantastic. But did that happen early, or was there other things that interested you?
The jewelry was fine. I remember the first couple pieces of pottery that really fascinated me. I remember we got in, a Maria and a blue corn, and I was just mesmerized, in the colors and what they were. And I was thinking, this is just incredible. So then after that, for spring break, I'd make my folks, we'd go down to New Mexico for spring break, and I'd make them go to every one of the Pueblos, and I'd have a list of everybody we had to go and meet. And I was like some sort of little, 18-year-old, 17-year-old fanboy going around wanting to meet all of these artists.
Who did you meet? Did you get to meet Maria?
Maria was way before my time.
Yeah.
But Blue Corn, and then getting to meet Grace Medicine Flower and Joseph Lone Wolf, and just sort of, Margaret Defoe and all the people.
And would your folks buy pots from them? Or,
they would.
Or would you buy pots?
No, they would on some. Some of them were just, even at that time, sort of out of our range of what we were doing. So it was more just, I'd look at their things in the books, and I'd look at, Richard Spivey's book on Maria, and I'd look at, I'd get the new books that would come out, like the Jerry Jacka ones, and then we'd go through that, and I'd be like, let's go meet all of these people now.
Right. Dillingham's book. Did you ever get to meet Richard?
I only met him once or twice.
Yeah.
And again, I think it was sort of at the very end of him doing things.
Yeah.
And, I was still pretty much a kid then. So yeah. I only remember
You're
going to his house
still pretty much
once.
a kid.
Thanks.
Yeah. When were you born? Let's find out.
Very, very long ago. I guess that's all.
You don't have to tell us.
I won't.
All I know is he's the youngest one in this group.
I think I'm the youngest one in this business.
Yeah,
sometimes.
you definitely are, which means you'll be the last man standing.
Although I think I'm now one of the oldest on our street in Scottsdale.
Oh, that's great.
So I think I'm either the oldest or second oldest gallery on that.
And you've been on that street in Scottsdale for 23 years?
Yep.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's just amazing. But you did recently move, right?
I did. So I'm on Marshall Way now. So,
yeah.
But I still I'm still
yeah. So, and if you go to his old place, it's not there, but it's just down the street, and it's a much nicer, bigger, larger, more impressive, fun gallery.
Yeah. It's just 3 blocks away.
So you're 17, 18. You love this stuff. You're collecting. Have you started to collect at this point?
I did. So I started to buy miniatures.
Yeah,
because that was kind of what I could afford. And
right.
I'll tell you the funniest story. This is almost kind of embarrassing, but I remember one year when I was in high school, and I wanted for Christmas a Grace Medicine Flower pot. And they were so, I mean, it's, they were $1,000 or more.
What year would have this been about?
Mid-'80s.
Yeah.
And I told my folks if they could get me a Grace medicine flower, I didn't want anything else for Christmas. Nothing else. So we get our presents, or open stuff up, open, and I get nothing. Except for one box, and it's a Grace medicine flower pot that somehow they had come across. This was at sort of the height of her, you couldn't find her things anywhere.
Was this when she was still doing the black?
Yeah, it was a black piece, and it was
little sgraffito kind of like
and it was a
camellia.
Miniature, and but I mean, they were still expensive, and
I remember.
But that was all I wanted. I was just like, if I could have a Grace medicine flower.
Did they put it in a big box?
It was, and that was it. I just had one box sitting there.
And a big one, even though it's a little teeny box.
Because it was an inch and a half.
And, man, I would have loved that YouTube moment.
So that was funny.
I got the Grace.
I was the happiest kid ever. It was like the weirdest thing, though. I mean, what 18-year-old kid is just dying to get a Grace medicine flower.
Do you still have it?
I do.
Yeah, I've got the same pot. The first pot I got when I was about 7, which is a little animalito bird on the plaza here in Santa Fe, and it's got a chipped wing, which I played with, and I still have it.
My very first one was a piece that I bought from Paul Speckled Rock.
Oh, yeah.
And it was one of his sort of that rock-shaped pieces, and it has a duck on it. And I always tell everybody, never get rid of the very first piece you buy, even if you hate it and you have to put it in a box.
It's a good reminder.
Always remember, because you either could start out with a really bad piece of junk.
And I'm sure you're not saying that about the Paul Speckled Rock.
No, I still like it. I look at it and I think, that's kind of cool. Like that was where I started, and that's where you build from, and that's what you learn from. And
he's always open about going to his house and showing you. I always felt that he was one of those guys.
When I was growing, he was really kind.
Yeah.
He was a really nice guy. He was always very courteous, and any questions I would have. And, I think I'm very lucky. I think being sort of the young kid in the business at the time, everybody else was a lot older when I even first opened the gallery, that I had so many people that really were good mentors. I mean, you were helpful, and Spivey was helpful, and
Richard was a gem.
Yeah, Richard,
and we're going to talk about him too.
Amazing, and Dick Howard was really helpful, and I could just go down a list that I think I'm really, really lucky to have had so many people that were willing to be helpful and nice, as opposed to just sort of like, who is this kid and what are you doing here? And
I know you're going to take a piece of our business. Yeah. No, I think for the most part, our business is. We treat each other as colleagues. We want people to succeed. It's good for us too. It gets the word out there.
Yeah, I think when I first started, it felt like some people were very proprietary. Like, you'd walk into a gallery and they'd be like, "Oh, you're another gallery," and
I'm not going to give you
not even talk to you.
Right.
But today, I think I have. I think I have great relationships with every gallery, and some are better than others. But it's more. I don't feel like it's weird that I could walk in any place or talk to anyone, or call someone and say, "Hey, you know more about this than I do. Can you help me? I don't know the answer to it." And vice versa, that I have galleries all the time, that'll call me and say, "Hey, I got in this piece and I don't know enough about it. Do you think it's a Tony Day? Do you think it's really a Maria? Do you think it's a Serafina? Have you seen something like it before?" And I guess now I'm old enough that I have that frame of reference of looking at, I probably have looked at and held more Tony Days than anybody but Tony. Working on that book.
I'm sure that's true.
I've probably seen more of them, and probably outside of the Tafoya family, I've probably looked at and held more Margaret Tafoyas.
I bet that is also true.
I
don't even know. I'd have to think. It'd be interesting to see how many Tonys I've actually bought and sold. It's probably somewhere in the 75, 85 range, I would think. And he didn't do many, right? What did he do? Maybe 400, 500?
Maybe, yeah. Because he said he did 30 a year, so 15 years. Some things, some years he did less, some he did more. But even within that, there's so many that I've looked at that, in private collections that they're never going to sell, or in museums, or, when I was doing research, I was trying to see as many pieces as possible. Whether they were saleable or not wasn't really the point. It was really trying to get a really good understanding.
We're going to get to that part because you are a researcher, and that's a really important part of our business that a lot of people don't do. But I still want to know what the 18-year-old kid does. So you've got your beautiful pot, your Grace medicine flower. It's sitting up there. Now what happens? You get out of high school. Then what do you do?
So go to university.
Which university?
I go to University of Colorado. And there, then after, I get my undergrad degree in history and in Russian.
In Russian?
In Russian
Why
language.
Russian?
I was always just fascinated with that.
And do you speak Russian?
I do.
Let's hear it.
Nope.
Oh,
that's
come
not very
on.
good. I don't want any comments on how my Russian is.
Oh, you can't hear even a little bit?
No, probably not. And then I went to grad school. I got my MBA from Thunderbird in Arizona.
And what was that in?
Finance. And then I worked overseas in Volgograd used to be Stalingrad. So I worked over there, and then
Doing what?
It was back in the early 90s, so it was setting up joint ventures between U.S. and Russian companies. So it was kind of the wild west of Russia right after the fall of the Soviet Union and before things started.
So you graduate. So you go 4 years. You graduate, and then you immediately go to grad school, and your graduate degree is in one more time.
Finance.
Right.
I got an MBA.
And then you go to Russia, and work as a
business consultant. Basically, it really is setting up joint ventures. And
what was that like, by the way?
It was fascinating. I mean, I really enjoyed my time there. People were wonderful. It was, it was just a very hard time there because it was, right after the Soviet Union. It was a tough time.
That was when it had just fallen.
And
bring down your wall.
Things were just economically very hard times for people, and they were just trying to sort of refigure out how you.
And what was your job? What did you do? What was
literally was that we would meet with Russian companies, and they were trying to export or import things, and they had no money. So there's no, the ruble was falling by the day, and we would try and find U.S. partners for them who could trade something or figure out a way to facilitate that business transaction. And so it was really sort of traded this sort of.
And so would you call around and talk to different businesses and say, this is what we have, or was your
They would actually come to us. So they would come in and say, we want to sell this to the U.S. or this, and then vice versa. U.S. companies would be saying, we want to send this to Russia or this. How do we do that? How do we get our product there? And again, when they can't pay for it.
And do you have to understand the businesses that are involved, or is your job really more of a translator, facilitator?
It was really understanding the business. So we would do sort of business analysis, look at what they had, try and find partners for them on both sides. So it was, there were companies here, or business part of it here in the U.S. that they were looking at U.S. companies, we were looking at the Russian ones and trying to match those things up.
And any of those deals, do you ever follow to see if any of them stayed intact?
I'm not sure many of them, because I think once, sort of the economy picked up there, I think that there was no longer a necessity for that. Once the cash economy, you're not just the cash economy. You have actual, things have changed so much.
And how long did you do that?
I was just there for a couple of years, and I came back and opened up the gallery.
So while you were doing that, so you're living in Russia, did you collect anything or go look around for Russian,
I was interested in Russian art, obviously, and I'm interested in Russian icons and things, but I didn't really collect anything, and a lot of it is over there. Anything at that time, pre-1945, you couldn't take out of the country anyway, that it's a national treasure. So it wasn't really that. I wasn't looking at buying things, and again, it was more, I'd go to the antique shops and just kind of root around.
But you would do that. But you never found an Indian pot over there.
No, I mean, there's a totally different aesthetic and totally different interest. And so I'm kind of interested in Russian history as well. So it was fascinating to me, and it was an interesting place to be and get to go and check things out.
And so you do that for a couple of years, and I'm sure that was very eye-opening. You learned a lot about business. And then at what point when you're over there do you go, I want to get back to what kind of my roots are?
Actually had kind of an interesting opportunity that there was, in the same week, I got an offer that my job would change and I could go to Moscow. So, I was down in Volgograd, which was an amazing city. It was kind of out off the beaten path, right? So you wanted at the time to be in Moscow. You wanted to move there. And that was a good job offer. And then some things happened here in the States, and I thought, you know what, this might be a time that I could open a gallery. If I was going to do it, this is like the perfect moment.
It was a pivotal moment.
It really was. And both things happened in 1 week, and it was sort of like, you had to make your choice. Because if I was going to stay and go to Moscow and do all of that, then I really wasn't going to come back here for a while, and I really needed to.
And that's probably, you might have gone that way for your career.
It would have, because it really was enough of a job and type of thing that it's like, you know what, you'd make that into a career.
Did you call your mom and dad and ask their opinion?
I did. It was sort of a little bit of very early email days, so emails were not the easiest thing to do, and so I did call and talk to them a little bit about it. And
because they'd run a shop, they knew what it was all about.
And I knew what it was about. I'd grown up doing it. I knew it's feast and famine, and it's busy and it's not, and it's all of those.
And so,
things.
What did they say to you? What did they?
Whatever you want to do.
They did, even though you've done the college, you got the graduate, you got the thing.
They were. I think in their heart of hearts, they wanted me to come back to the States, right?
Yeah,
of course. But I think the reality was they thought, if that was going to make me happy and that was what I wanted to do, then I would.
Did they want you to come back and run Serendipity?
No, and that was sort of my thing, was that I wanted to come back and open up my own space and really have kind of my own gallery. So
and your own taste, your own things.
That I could sort of run all of it.
And how many pots did you have at that time? Just a few in your collection?
I had a lot of miniatures.
You had a lot of miniatures. Yeah. So you were still collecting, but you knew somehow you could probably make it as a business because you had seen your parents do it and you'd done it.
Yeah, and I think there were, again, things would kind of changed all of a sudden in the art business. And so I just kind of would hear what was going on from my folks. And I thought, maybe this is the time that you could kind of, step in and try something.
So you come back to Arizona.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I looked all over. I thought about, should I be in Colorado or California or in Phoenix, in Phoenix or in New Mexico? And it seemed like Scottsdale was the best fit.
And was that because of just the environment, or you thought the business environment was best in Scottsdale as for a business versus, say, Santa Fe or Denver?
I think the business environment seemed the best for me for there.
And that was mid-'90s, maybe?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and it was still, it was definitely happening. It was continuing to go down and I think really be very active for quite a while. So you found so what did you do then?
So I started buying pot, and I went out to go meet artists, and again.
How'd you find the place though? Did you? Because it was active. There wasn't.
It was hard to find a place.
I was going to say there might not.
Somehow,
not many
I was looking
spaces.
around, and then it's the old thing. You talk to someone who had the space that I wanted, or that was available, and it was like the right size and the right amount of rent and the right everything, and it was sort of the perfect moment to make it sort of happen.
And did you do it on your own, or did you go in with another gallery at that point?
I did it on my own, and not even with my folks' help. And all my miniatures that I had bought over the years all went out on the shelves. That was sort of my finance, all the money I had.
That was your inventory.
Yeah. And then, I was buying pots and doing things for the gallery. And I think the day before I opened, I think I was down to like my last $1,000. Literally like writing that last check for something, just thinking, oh my God, if this doesn't work, I've got a lot of pottery and I have nothing else.
And when did you open? What was it? The month? Do you remember the month?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was in October.
Yeah, good time to open. Smart. You're at least smart enough not to open in, say, June.
Yeah. So it was a good time, a good opportunity time. And it was one of those, I just remember like all the things sort of went wrong that could go wrong on opening day and all of
like
this
what?
stuff. Oh, like things wouldn't print and this wouldn't happen. The computer didn't work and then.
And you're a one-man band too, right?
And I was. And my folks were helping me, but it was sort of me, I'd been putting it all together and we'd done the promotion. And then I remember I had some people that were friends of my folks and they came in and they were like, oh, this just really isn't what we'd call, our quality level. And I thought, oh my God, oh no, what am I going to do now? Like everybody's going to hate what I have in there. And I remember I was just like totally inconsolable about it. And my mom tapped me down and she's like, you know what, you've done it all. This is what you want to do. Just, you have to still go tonight and go to your opening and do, and run your business. And she said,
did you sell a pot at your opening night? Do you
opening
remember?
Night, we sold over a third of the inventory I had in there.
Oh my, yeah.
So it was a.
Did Denny Lyons show up for that? Denny and Janice, do you remember?
I don't remember.
Yeah, you were just learning who all the players were and who liked pottery, and they were all trying to figure out who's this young kid that's speaking Russian.
Exactly. They probably thought, "Wow, who is this dumb kid who's trying to get into this business?" But
yeah, you were young too. I mean, you were a young kid.
I was in my 20s, and
that's very young.
But it was awesome. That was a great moment to think, okay, at least I can. It's not going to like totally go bankrupt 24 hours later.
And so at that point, you've got at least it seems like you got a viable business. You've got to start getting inventory. So what did you do at that point?
Really, then it was just artists that I knew or I remembered from my folks, or who kind of remember my folks or knew me. It was just going, and I don't know if you did this. I would go once a month, and I'd either fly or drive out to New Mexico. And once a month I would go, or every other month I'd go up to Hopi. And I would call everybody that I knew, and I would try and get them to do work on pots. And I'd go up there, and I would just make my rounds at Hopi. And then I'd either fly or drive out to New Mexico, and I would make my rounds out here. And I would talk to everybody and try and, and then just as there were artists that I wanted, I'm lucky because I think there was a leap of faith that they even would work with me. When I got Louis Antifoy or Nathan Youngblood or any of them that, again, they took a risk. I could have been a mess.
Yeah, I've got a funny Luann story. So I'm a military doctor, and I was collecting pottery. I love pottery, and I go out to see Luann and ordered a big red pot, and we kind of designed what it would be and, house size and everything. And she said, sure, I'll do it for you. And that was it. So I waited and then didn't hear anything. I kind of forgot about it. And then 2 years later, I get a call that comes in through the military that says, there's somebody talking about a pot on the other end. And, I get it. And she goes, I got that pot. That was the first thing she said. I said, Luann? She goes, yep, I got that pot. It's done.
Nice.
And so she, I sent her the money. She sent me the pot. I think she probably sent me the pot before I even sent the money. I mean, what a wonderful person she was. And, and I loved her work. I still love her work. I think she's one of the greats.
Yeah.
And so you must have had similar experiences where you tried to get, because the great potters don't really have pottery just sitting there waiting. So you had to.
No, I mean, Luann, it was sort of an interview. I mean, I met with her and her daughter, and they sat me down and, what could I afford to buy? And did I understand the business? And, and I mean, we went through sort of a process.
That's smart.
And it was smart on their part. And, I explained to them what I was doing and what I wanted and how it would work. And they were like, well, we'll think about it, come back.
Yeah.
And then, I mean, I worked with Luann for a long time, and she's really, really great to me. And, I think even with Grace, the Grace Medicine Flower, that, she kind of took me under her wing in a way, and she, would get me pots and do shows at the gallery, and she did or helped arrange doing a show with her and Joseph, and I think that was their last show together. So,
yeah, and some of those potters were showing probably at Gallery 10 too, and that was in Scottsdale and Santa Fe, and they were like, "No, can't do it," right?
Yeah.
So you had to kind of almost bide your time until that particular gallery no longer existed, which Phil Cohen had. And I'd love to have Phil Cohen out. Phil, if you're listening to this, we got to talk. But so you had to struggle with, okay, I can't get some of the great potters because they're already locked up. So what did you do about that?
I would just still go and talk to them and just say, if the time ever happens, I'm
here,
and talk about their work and talk about what they were doing. And I was, so there's a business side and then there's a personal side. And I was really interested in it. So I'd, go out and we would just chat about their pots and what they had done and, their career and things that and so it wasn't always, part of it's business, right? But part of it was just, I was fascinated. And,
yeah, that's the best
But
kind.
I could go and see Grace every time I went out to Santa Clara, and whether she had pots or didn't have pots or wanted to work, or didn't, that I'd stop and just chat and just kind of talk about what she was doing and what she thought about her art and all of these things. Was really, to me, was fascinating.
And do you remember that? I'm sure you do, but which artists you first got that said, okay, I'll show with you?
I had a pretty good group of them to begin with. I just remember Nathan was probably the first bigger name, and I remember it was kind of like the interview.
Yeah.
I had to go meet him, and then he again kind of took the risk and started getting me pots and working with me, and I worked with him over 20 years.
Yeah, and that's and it is a risk. I think for these artists that, especially if they're like Nathan's level, who was big time, they have to be willing to take the risk with you, and it's a big one. I had the same experience with Howard Post. He came on board, and he was a big time artist, and until he came on board, it made it harder. But once a Nathan Youngblood comes on, then other people, and you have good business and not a problem, and you stay in business, then I'm sure kind of some of the dominoes fell. He probably talked to other people and said, yeah, no, he's cool. I like Charles.
Yeah, I mean, and I think it's one of those things, I think in business, I think it's a hard thing for people to learn that what you can do in 1 year or 3 years or 5 years or 15 years or 25 years is all different. And sometimes what you can do in what happened, as a kid, I wanted it all to happen right away, of course. But what happens after 5 years is you couldn't, I realized then you couldn't do it at the first year, right? So even though people kind of knew who I was and my folks had the place and all of these things, I was still new. And, so you were still the risk, right? And then after 5 years, well, you made it 5 years. So now people would consign stuff now, or more
so
things.
Did you figure it took 5 years before people would start really doing that kind of thing?
Yeah. I think it's a 3 to 5 year, because people.
I even think it's longer. Personally.
I think
it's 10 years, but personally, before they really get the.
Yeah, I think if I had just started and had no knowledge of it, I think it would have been 10 years. But I think it was a good.
Yeah, that's true. You already had your 10,000 hours of.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't coming in and trying to figure out how a pot was made. Right. I already had a lot of that under my belt. So
yeah.
I think.
You had met all these artists as a kid and growing up, so they knew you had interest.
Yeah, so I think that helped too. So I think even if I wasn't showing an artist, I think they kind of knew who I was, and so it kind of worked out. But I think you just have to have patience. It's the Zen of pottery, but maybe it's the Zen of business too.
And so but you chose to go pottery, just pottery, because there's a lot of things else you could have done. Why is that? Why only pottery?
When I opened it, everybody told me that was the biggest mistake ever. They said I would totally go under. That if you didn't have, and you were in Indian art, if you didn't have fetishes and jewelry, especially jewelry and kachinas and painting and do all of that, you would never make it. And they said, this is going to be a disaster. And I'm glad I did what I wanted to do because I think it's been a great success.
What allows you to be a specialist?
I think as time has gone along, the way the business and the world has changed, I think a specialist is actually even more required today. I think people want that almost more intense knowledge about the things that you really do well. I mean, it's not that I can't sell paintings and I couldn't have jewelry in there, but I think they really want that intense, that long period of knowledge, that understanding of the art, kind of like you have. I mean, you have an understanding of the art that not just comes from your research and knowledge and education, but 30 years later, you just have a time span of knowledge.
That's right.
You know what the pitfall. You're just like, I know that's this is a problem, that's a problem. If you do this, it's going to be an issue.
Well, and you start to see things too. I mean, especially with pottery, things can be restored, cracked, problems, fakes, frauds, all that stuff. And if you're spending a lot of money, or if it's a big time, piece of pottery, it's good to have a specialist that's going to be there to say, yeah, this is fine. I mean, I've seen a lot of things purchased at auctions that shouldn't have been, and they were at auction for a reason. They had a problem or a crack or something was going on, and that's why it ended up at auctions. People don't realize that, I got a bargain. You bring it in, and I go, well, where's the rest of it? There was a big chip here. It's been restored.
No, it's absolutely true, and I think people appreciate that knowledge base, and I think what you do and what I do is bringing that knowledge to people, and I mean, so I think people shouldn't be scared of going to galleries. I think there's a huge amount of knowledge that they can gain from it, and I think we're really on the front lines. I mean, in a way that honestly I'm not sure museums are, because they're dealing it in a totally different aspect. I don't think auction houses, they deal with too many different things. I don't think they're specialists or even especially in native art anymore.
Yeah, and you worked for a museum too, really. Weren't you the buyer for a period of time, a couple of years? You said, okay, let me try the Smithsonian.
I took a year and I went and worked out in the Smithsonian and helped them with their buying for the store.
Yeah, tell me about that, because that's a whole. So you've been running your own gallery for almost.
I run my own gallery and I take a year off.
And they contact you and said, hey, we want you to be. What was your job?
I was a specialty buyer.
So you bought for all the Smithsonian.
So I bought for National Museum of the American Indian in New York and D.C., and Freer Sackler, which is Asian art, and the African Art Museum. So
what was that like? Because that's it. Now you're also having to deal not just in Pueblo pottery, you have to deal in a whole variety of things. What was that?
You know what? It was actually, it was a great opportunity. It was really fun. I had the best time. I got to live in D.C. And again, I think it was this cool opportunity at sort of the right time when, things sort of worked out for it. And I think it was just bringing together lots of different skills that I had that I didn't think about or didn't, so it was trying to figure out how to get artists to sell to a bureaucracy.
Yeah, and that's probably your biggest problem, right? Was the bureaucracy.
The bureaucracy. So, I mean, it's a purchase order, they don't just come and write them a check. And how do you make that happen? And how do you get artists to understand that, if they order once, they may order, for the next 10 years over and over and over again.
Yeah.
How they function and how most galleries function, or a little store in Santa Fe or Espanola, someplace isn't the same thing. And so it was trying to make those alliances.
And could you make those? Could you get them to do it?
Yeah, I think it worked out well.
The question is, once you left, did they all just say, oh, I'm done, Charles is in here?
Some things didn't work out because I think even with the new buyers that replaced when I wasn't there, didn't quite understand. I mean, I think I'm lucky. So I had the ability to understand the artist's perspective, how they were looking at it.
And you've dealt with
them. So I could
them.
talk through them, right? So I could say, here's how it's going to work. I could do the hand holding, I could do that. If you don't understand that, you're just like, what are you doing? You don't understand business. And that is a very different, it's hard to get them to understand how to make that work. But on the other hand, I think we made some really great contacts, and so it was really fun. And even we went to the folk art market here and help find connections for the Freer Sackler and other shops there. So it was beyond just native art. And so I think, again, it was kind of that international business part. It came back into play and understanding the world and, working in native art and being respectful of culture and respectful of people and respectful of a lot of things is also the kind of thing you're learning when you're traveling and you're working overseas, is respectful of people and respectful of culture and respectful of things that they're thinking and doing.
But after a year, you'd said, okay.
The problem, I think, after a year was just, it was an amazing opportunity. And then I think some of it was just, a repetition, so it wasn't going to be. I don't know. So
it's more business and less culture, less creativity, probably.
And I think there were some opportunities again that I had for coming back to the gallery. So I'm working on another book. And
maybe cleared your mind a little bit too.
It did, sometimes I think it's okay to take a pause and do things and do things to challenge yourself. And it was just, if it's the right moment and the right thing and you can make it happen, you're very lucky. So
I want to backtrack a little bit and find out, when did you buy your first Maria? Do you remember? Because they were always expensive.
They were always expensive. I'm trying to think the first one that I kept and owned.
No, just the first one you bought. Yeah.
I remember I remember with my folks, and they bought one for their gallery so it was mid '80s, and I think it was retail of $1,200 or something, which was just a lot. Crazy, And so we had to someone brought it in, and it was one of those open, fully polished bowls, and it was maybe 10 inches across, and we had to all sit down as a family and discuss, could we afford, would you ever sell something for that kind of money?
Yeah.
It was so expensive. Would anybody ever buy, a $1,200 piece of pottery?
I know. I remember buying mine too. $325. Thought it was no way I can afford this. Somehow I've got, I was working as a physician in the military and managed to get one, because I couldn't get one before. I mean, I used to go to Popovi's studio and look at them and go, oh God, I'd love one of those, but no way.
Yeah.
It's just no way. But finally did. So, and then how about your first Tony? Do you remember that? Because that's even a step up above Maria's.
I'll tell you, this is probably a bad story. Well, it's a funny story, I guess, that I was in college and I went up to Vail with some friends, and I was like, hey, let's go to the Indian art stores. And we're looking around, and we walk into one store, and they had this pot, and it was marked Tom Tapia, and it was like $800. And I was like, oh my God. I'm like, I'm going to buy that pot. And my friends are just like, you are insane. Why would you spend $800? How do you even have $800? I'm like, I got credit cards. I'm going to fill up my credit cards and buy this pot.
The old Tom Tapia isn't a Tom Tapia.
Yeah, so
pot.
I talked to the lady. And so we talked a bit and figured out what the price was. And I said, okay, great, I'll take it. And so she runs it through, and she said, oh my gosh, I'm so embarrassed. She said, it's not Tom Tapia. And she said, it's Tony Day. And I said, that's fine. I still like it. I'll just take it anyway.
And the price didn't change or anything?
The price didn't change at all. I was just like, oh, please don't let the price change. Please don't let, because even then, I mean, they were, that was even at that, that was probably a $2,400 pot. Then it was a red jar bowl with a water serpent, and it's probably a $12,000 pot today.
Yeah.
Right? So, 800, so I was just like, oh my God, I can't believe I just bought a Tony.
And you're in college?
And I was in college. Yeah.
So what did you keep it? You must have kept it that
I was going to keep it for a while. And then that just,
it was too much money.
A lot of money.
All your credit cards
were.
So did you consign it to your folks?
I did.
Yeah, and they sold it for you. Who determined the price on it?
I did that. It was one of those things back then. I mean, you never saw Tony's pieces.
Yeah, well, they just didn't make them.
I'm not sure I'd maybe seen a couple in museums, and even then they were hard to find, and I couldn't find them anywhere.
But you knew it was his even then.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, you could see.
I looked at the design. I was like, I know whose that is.
Yeah.
And then...
That's where knowledge comes in play, folks.
And it was just that I think I kept it for like a month. I was just like the fantasy world of I own a Tony Day. And the real world of I'm a kid in college and I'd like to eat more than ramen. So I suppose I should pay off my credit cards and get rid of that pot.
Yeah. I maxed out all my credit cards the first time too when I decided I knew enough. And I did. I wiped them all out and I bought I think it was about 18 Navajo rugs. For 2 years I looked and I learned. I didn't buy a single Navajo rug. And then when I told my wife, I know enough now. And I found a collection, and then there was an auction, and I just wiped out all our credit cards, maxed them out, and she was like, oh my God, we've got like 20 rugs. You sure you know what you're doing? I said, I know what I'm doing. At this point, I know what I'm doing. I know the price structure enough. I understand
I think for us, it's education, and I think we're able to help educate collectors. And I would say the same thing, even if you're not a collector, when you're buying things, just ask all the questions. There's no dumb questions, and it's also educate yourself. Because, if you think all black pots look alike and you can't figure out why one is 100 and one is 500 and one is 25,000, then go into someplace and say, pull out one of each of those price ranges. I want you to explain to me why there's a difference.
Yeah.
Just visually. I don't care who the artist is, don't give
so
me the
I
artist thing.
Encourage everybody that listens to this to go to Charles Keene's gallery and have him pull out 3 pots, all from different price ranges, and have him go through these for you.
Well, you know what? I think it takes about 5 minutes because I think when you do it...
No, I know, and you would do it. I know.
And I would do it every time.
But I do still encourage everyone to go do that.
Thank you, Mark. I will make note. But no, you do it, and all of a sudden it's, it
becomes clear.
Yeah.
If you have an expert showing you why, this is this, and this.
And it's not just because of the name on the bottom. There are
there's
real
lots
reasons
of
visual and technical and all of these things.
Age, color,
Absolutely.
shape,
all the things. And even if we were,
condition, all those things. So you get involved in, because you've written a book on Tony Day, and there was a museum exhibit in Santa Fe as well, which was fantastic. How did that come about?
The Tony Day book was actually kind of fun because I think I badgered Richard. So Richard Spivey wrote the books on Maria back in 1978 or 79. And he knew everybody in the family, and I think I'd even talked to you, and you'd said, because I wrote the first book on Margaret Foy, and you said, you should do one on Tony. And I kept on badgering Richard, and he was just like, no.
Yeah.
Then he said, well, I want to do one on Tony's paintings. And I was like, well, no.
Right.
And then I just remember one time I badger him every time I'd go down and see him. And we were standing outside his house. I was getting ready to leave. And again, Richard was just always really nice and a good mentor. And I said, Richard, you can't wait forever. We have got to do this book on Tony. And I said, I know you want to do paintings. I know you don't even want to do the book. But if we did the paintings and pottery, I said, let's find a publisher. Let's make it happen. And I said, everybody. I can't do it alone. I wouldn't do it myself.
Yeah.
I said, you know all the people. You just interview them. I'll write everything. I'll get all the pictures done. I'll do everything else. That's all you have to do. You go talk to people because that's all you like to do.
And he's ill now. He's got MS. He's got some other problems going on. Yeah, he actually would come. He actually asked my opinion because he lived in Tucson and we were close friends.
Yeah.
And I go, man, you got to do this book. I said, Charles is the right partner. He's the right thing. You should do it. You have the knowledge. Charles has the energy. I said, just put your name in front of it. You'll be fine. And I don't know if he did or not. I didn't look. I'm sure you wrote 90% of it.
If you read the foreword to it, and Richard wrote it, and he said, I agreed to do this. But I told Charles I would agree to do this book if he would do all the work, and he did.
Yeah.
And Richard interviewed everybody, and it was actually an awesome way to do it because I was sort of like the third person listening into these conversations, and instead of me interviewing, so I could give him a list of questions and he'd ask them. But instead of me interviewing them and having that personal connection, a lot of them are people I'd never met.
Right. A lot of the kids, grandkids.
And so I'm sort of listening in, and I could take a very different approach to it. And I think we ended up with a really important book. I mean, I think it is a book that...
that's one you should have in your library, folks.
Really stands the test of time. I think it talks about, him as a person and his art in a way that before that, I think, people were like me. They saw one pot, and then you'd see maybe 1-2 years later, and you didn't quite get it, and you didn't understand why they were expensive, and you didn't understand what they were.
And you get some good analytical stuff too, which is what I like. That helps break down time frames, signatures, things like that. Yeah. And so Richard was an interesting guy, wasn't he?
Oh man, he was awesome.
So I really, I'll tell you a couple of Richard stories just because it's worth hearing what kind of human being was. I'm going to tell you two. One was he came to my gallery once, and so I was doing a show for like third graders for my kids' school, and because I want to get them indoctrinated. And Richard Spivey happens to show up to talk to me about pots or something. I said, Richard, I've got all these third graders. I said, would you mind talking about Maria while you're here? And he goes, oh, I'd love to. And he sat in front of all these third graders and told them about Maria and Maria Pottery. And he must have spent 40 minutes. And of course, the kids were starting to lose it a little bit, but the parents that were there, because there was a lot of parents, and the teachers all thought that was the greatest thing. That was the one that shows his generosity. The second one about Richard, which was so crazy, he's in hospice. He doesn't have long to live. I call him from Marin and I say, I just want to find out. I heard you're in hospice. I want to see how you're doing. He goes, oh, I'm doing fine. He goes, tell me what's going on there. Tell me about the pots. And I said, well, there was this one great pot I saw. He goes, oh my gosh, we should do something on that. You and I could do something on that. Maybe you could send me pictures. And I thought, oh my God, man, I want to go out this way.
Absolutely.
He is totally still into doing something with a pot. He's in hospice, and he's not going. And he didn't last more than a few days after that. And he was still had that passion burning. And so that's an individual that if you can follow the guy's footsteps like that, my goodness gracious.
We should both be so lucky. He loved the art so much, and I think that passion for it. You see that, and you think, That's what I want to
Did
have.
he give you any tips that you can remember on either Maria or Tony?
I just remember one time he'd come into the gallery, or we'd go around Scottsdale or go around places, and he'd be like, I'm going to tell you everything I know about these Maria pots. And he would pick them up and he'd be like, Poe would tell me this. And we would look at him and then he'd say, well, Maria used to say this. So you put your hand here and you do this, turn it this way and you need to do this. And that's how you know that, he's like, because I think something happened somewhere along the line. There were some Marias that he thought weren't real. And so he's like, I have to tell you how to spot them. And so it was a hands-on. It wasn't like a written thing. And we would literally go through the pots and, here, hold this pot and see the weight. And now pick this one up. And now tell me what's different. And it was this sort of
mentorship.
It really was. I mean, we'd go through and, everywhere I'd go with him and he would just drag me through all of those Maria pots and just, here's this and look at this and check out this little thing. And here's what sharing that kind of knowledge, how, I'm sure he did the same thing with you. And that's an amazing thing. That's not something, you pick up a book and find anywhere. And it's hard to translate to other people. But
that's true. And we would have things that would come in my gallery, and I'd call Richard in and say, because he lived in Tucson, and said, come in, we got to look at this one and discuss this. And we would go back and forth, why not, different things. And that's right. That's how you learn. And the one thing he always told me, and he said, well, you always have to say this, Mark. He goes, it's Povica. He goes,
oh, man, I know.
He goes, it's not Povica, it's Povica. And so if you take one thing away from Richard, it's Maria Povica. That's how he did the same thing to you, I'm sure.
What's the thing you can't say? Sanai.
Yeah.
You can never say Sanai. I would say, oh, yeah, go ahead to Sanai. Like, it's always Santo Defonso. It's never Sanai.
So if you take those two things away, you'll know you'll have made Richard Spivey happy.
And sienna and tan. I got yelled at a lot about calling tan sienna and sienna tan.
Oh, interesting. So, and what would he say?
Well, because tan is wet polished and sienna is two-toned. So sienna, they use a torch to burn off the black, or to refire, or it's fired twice. Uh-huh. And he was like, it is, because it's such different processes, we really have to use the right terminology, because you don't give it credit if you're not doing it right. Yeah. So I try, I hear him in my mind all the time when I'm showing a piece, and I'm like, and this is tanish sienna. So I try and get it right all the time.
Well, the first pot that Poe did like that, I actually had a letter that he wrote, and this is something you may or may not know, but and Poe wrote in that letter, I did this brown pot, and I'm going to call it Caramel. He goes, but I don't know if I like the name or not. So that was his original name for it, was Caramel. And I think it was 1964.
Yep, that sounds about right.
Yeah.
I mean, I think, whether that's the right term or not, I think it's just, as on our end, we have to be able to distinguish it, because if you call things wrong, then people don't know what, so Nathan does tan pots, but Tony did sienna and Poe did sienna. So, and because it's such a different process, I think, it's our job to try and really help people understand that those are different things.
That is exactly what we do. So what are you working on now as far as any kind of research or books? You also had a book that came out last year?
The fourth one just came out last year.
Yeah, right. That's a big.
It's a big old book.
Yeah, it is it's a heavy table.
Awesome.
Tell us about that book, because that was an interesting project.
That book was spoken through clay, and it was...
is that New Mexico Press that did that?
Yeah, Museum of New Mexico Press.
Yeah.
And so that book was really about contemporary and some signed potters, so potters of the, starting around 1920. And my whole idea for that, it was Eric Dobkin's collection that was a foundation for it, and he had a pretty spectacular collection. So, but the idea really was, and in talking with him, I said, it's not really interesting to just have you say this is great and I think this is beautiful, and I look at it and say this is beautiful. I was like, that's not really my thing. So we talked about it, and I said, what about we do a book and I interview all the artists, and we have them talk about every one of the pieces. So every caption talks about the piece, the artist profiles are the artists talking about themselves, their life, whatever they want to do, and if it's historic pieces, I'll ask family members to comment on it. What do they think about this?
Yeah, get the artist's view of
So it's all about the artist, and really it became this very artist-driven book.
Did this surprise you, some of the things that they said that you would have never considered?
I learned something every time. So for each artist, there's about a page bio, and that's condensed down from probably anywhere from a 2-hour to 3-hour interview. Because I knew everybody, so you kind of sit down and talk about it, and I'd say, hey, tell me about this and tell me about that, and let's talk about this in your life, and what do you think about this and what you've done, and what about this period, and so then we could kind of condense it down into something that wasn't just, here's a list of awards that no one ever wants to read, kind of them just talking about what they remember, and it could be anything, and then they got to edit it and go back. I wanted the artist to be very involved. I wanted it to be kind of hands-on in a sense.
Probably was hard trying to figure out which artist to include because there's so many great ones.
It really was more about the collection. So the collection.
I see. So you use that as that's
if
nice.
If he didn't own it, I couldn't include it.
Yeah,
so,
made it easier too, so you could tell artists if they didn't get.
Yeah, I mean, I just didn't have any control over that part. So that part was a finite part, but the other side of it was I could do a lot of other things with it, and he gave me amazing, thankfully, great leeway. And I think for the artists, I mean, it just really became. I think in native art now, I think there's, obviously a desire for the artist to have greater voice. I think there's been a little bit of it in the past. I think a lot of it, it's when you're talking about artists who are deceased, it's easier to have a different way to write and do things, right? But when it's living artists, I mean, they don't want to open a book. Every one of the books I've done, I never wanted to have that moment where they were like, ugh, don't buy that book. It's so terrible. I can't believe you wrote that. Or this is embarrassing, or embarrasses my family. So every one of them I've given everything to people in the family to check over. And I'm like, if there's something you don't like, let me know, and I could decide whether I wanted to keep it or not. But I at least wanted to have that
input
and say, you know what, this just isn't appropriate. Or
that's important to do.
You're talking about something, oops, we talked about something that's non-printable. Please don't put that in.
Yeah, even in my murder mysteries, and it's it's fiction, I still have native Navajo readers look at it so they can give me input that go, not really what they would do, or that's, or that shouldn't be done. And that's very helpful.
Yeah, because you don't want to have that thing that crosses the line, right? And all of a sudden you don't think it did.
Right.
And
or is just totally wrong.
Yeah, well, totally wrong. But I mean, even on our end, I mean, artists and do things and go to places and we kind of have an open door and a courtesy extended to us in a way that maybe not everybody does.
That's true.
But I think then we have a higher responsibility of how we deal with that.
I agree.
And I think that, as the gallerists and people involved in native art who are not native, I think we really have to think that we do have that higher responsibility. We should be cautious and do things correct. I mean, I know when I did the first show of early San Ildefonso pots, and
not Sanai,
the early Sanai pot, but a lot of designs and things I had no clue what they were, and I would talk to Russell Sanchez, who was amazingly helpful. And if he didn't know, then he would go ask someone in his family. So I'd send him a list and say, I don't know what this is, or who signed this. This is a name I've never heard. He'd go ask his aunt, or he'd find out. And so it was a learning experience for him, but I really wanted to get it right. And then the more I did that, the more I realized, wow, I really need to be a little more respectful of thinking about what the right answer is.
Right.
Instead of me just saying, hey, it looks like a cloud.
Right. And maybe it is, maybe it isn't.
Yeah. But if it's not, I mean, if it is, it is. But if it's not, but it really is something totally different and I missed it, then I should be better than that.
Right. And it's easy to do because culturally you're not San Ildefonso.
And, you hear, again, we talk about a ton of stuff and you know a lot, but you don't know everything.
Yeah.
And sometimes when we start looking a little bit further back out of our frame of reference, I think even the artists don't, they may not have heard the story and they may not have asked the right question of the right family member. And so challenging them to find out the answer is a great moment for them too. But all of a sudden it's this, epiphany. And I think for someone like Russell, I think it's helped change the work that he does. I think he really thought about his Sanai pieces in a totally different way than he did 20 years ago.
He probably incorporated some of the things that he wouldn't have done and was like, oh, this is very interesting.
Absolutely, because we were looking at shapes and designs and a lot of things going on in the 20s completely disappeared. So it was sort of this eye-opener for some of the artists.
And so where do you see things going in Pueblo pottery? I mean, things are changing millennially wise. Do you see younger buyers coming into the market? Or are they buying through maybe not even visiting your gallery, but maybe going online and looking?
I think it's two things. I think native art has a really strong future to it. I think it does from a standpoint that it's handmade and it's local and it's, and
it's American.
And it's American and it's really great American art. And I think that's, it's kind of like what I wanted to do with the Spoken Through Clay book. I wanted to photograph it and do it so every piece looked like an art object, that it wasn't just craft. It wasn't like just pottery. It was an art object. Mm-hmm. And really kind of push the thought of people to think about it in ways that, it wasn't just on a sand dune with a feather. And, it's just all fine. It's just, I think it's better than, it opens it up to other people who wouldn't look at it otherwise. And I think there's some great art being done. I think there's some great artists. I think the historic things, there's some amazing things out there. So I think I think there's a good future for it. I think also.
Do you see the young collectors coming in?
Absolutely.
Do you see the Charles Kings running in going, oh my God?
I mean, I'm not sure there were a lot of me at the time either,
maybe.
But I think that there's I have a really strong group of collectors that are in their late 30s, early 40s. They don't buy a lot, but they're buying.
And do they engage you differently?
Absolutely. And I engage them differently because I'm like, don't buy tons of stuff. Just buy a few great pieces. You're going to be so much happier. Just, you come in here and you want a Maria pot, or you want a Nathan Youngblood or a Virgil Ortiz, and in the meantime you've bought 10 little things for $100, and then you complain. It's like, let me help you build a great collection.
Yeah, you curate, you help them. And I think that's a very important bit of knowledge we pass on too. Is I've always told people, don't buy 5, buy 1.
Yep. And to a person, I bet if you ask them, and they've said it to me, they're grateful to get that advice, because otherwise they would have just bought a lot of little stuff.
They will.
And now they're looking at it going, 5 years later, and they're like, hey, we've got an awesome collection here. And, and then if they bought Kachinas or other things, they transferred that over. So it wasn't just they don't have a collection of stuff, and they don't have a house filled with things. But at, 45 years old, they've got some pretty nice pieces. And I think I'm also lucky because I get to work with, Virgil Ortiz and Susan Falwell and a lot of younger potters.
Yeah, do you see any young people on the horizon are really doing some great stuff?
But I think those artists, they bring in a lot of younger buyers.
And who are the artists now, the up and comings? Is there anybody, and I don't want to put you on the spot, but there must be some that you really
I just think there are some really good younger artists right now doing things, and I think there's a really great sort of sense of creativity. And what's cool is there are some that are very, in terms of pottery, very modernist. So very contemporary, and some that are really super traditionalist. And I like that both of those things are really driving them. So the traditionalists want it to be super traditional, but it's not at the expense of an artist getting to do what they want to do. So, Les Domingo can paint in acrylic, and Juan Cruz, can paint watercolor paintings in clay on his pots, and Daryl Whitegeese and others, and Jordan Roller and Chris Youngblood can do really super traditional pots. So you have all of these things kind of together. Everybody gets to do what they want to do. They just be passionate about it.
And as far as the gallerist, for your own taste of what you're going to buy or what you're going to show, you don't really care as long as it's good, I assume. Or do you?
I'm probably pretty picky. I guess I'm pretty picky.
No, but I mean, if somebody brought in something really avant-garde out of the box, that you wouldn't go, I don't know if I have a market for this, or would you?
I think on things like that, I've always said, I'll figure out a way to take the risk. So I'll give you 2 quick examples. I remember the first time Virgil Ortiz did faces on his pots. And he called me up and he's like, I'm doing faces on my pots. And I was like, oh my God, that's never going to sell. I mean, no one did faces, on the pot. And I'm like, I don't even know what that means. I don't know. It's like, I'm going to do one. And I was like, I can't figure it out. Like I couldn't envision it. And I can, this was before, sort of the texting and everything else. So I'm trying to guess, what does it mean to put a face on a pot? So he's all excited about it. And I said, okay, here's the deal. You can't do 1, you have to do 3. Because one, I don't understand what that means. People will just think it's a one-off. So do 3. I said, so what's the worst? You'll have 1, I'll have 1, and we'll give 1 away. You know what I mean? I said, so that's the deal. I said, I'll make a commitment to it, but we'll have to figure it out if these are a disaster. Yeah. He's like, okay. And
I'm sure. He's like, okay, 3 pots. Cool.
Well, not just that, but I said, we will have to, I'm not going to just like buy them and do it and not.
Yeah, you need to show a body of work.
Let's figure out how to do this and do it right. And so I tried to offer advice that I think was useful. And of course, they were the first 3 things that sold, and he's done face pots since.
Yeah. And when he brought those in, did you go, oh my God, these are really unique and different? Or do you still go, oh, I don't know?
No, I thought they were spectacular.
Yeah, you knew.
I would own every one of those. And if they came back in the gallery, I'd probably be like, oh my God, I wish I could take that home now.
Yeah, I was going to say, are you sorry you didn't keep the first one?
There's stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I think it was the same first time Russell Sanchez did copper leafing on it. And he brought a piece in, and I was just like, wow, that is so unexpected.
Yeah.
I don't know what to do with that. And it was the same thing. I said, okay, here's the deal. I said, I don't even know what to think about it because no one's done it in native art, and I said, so if it doesn't sell in a year, trade it back to me. That's all I ask, give me, but otherwise let's do it. Let's see what happens. And of course, like the next day it sells, and then, there you go.
Yeah. Richard Spivey told me about Helen Schupla bringing in melon jars at Christmas once. That was the first time she'd ever done it. And she was really apprehensive that these things wouldn't be of interest. And he said, oh, these things are great. Yeah, you should make more of those. And then all of a sudden the prices shot up and he couldn't hardly get any more melon pots. But yeah, I mean, it's that encouragement, I think, from dealers just like yourself with Virgil and with Russell and Richard with, Helen, that really kind of can change the way an artist looks at things as well.
I think that we're willing to take the risk, right? So we take the risk with the artist. And so sometimes you just have to kind of like take that deep breath and say, okay, we'll see what happens with this.
Right.
I just don't know. And, some things don't work, right? But
that's
other
right.
things, you just have to sit down with the artist and say, hey, here's how I see it. Here's what I think, but I think they're cool and I think it's interesting. And I think this is a great, I like to think at times the gallery is a good space for artists to be able to do what they want to do. So I encourage them to take risks. And that as long as it's well done, I mean, I don't want something shocking and poorly made. If you want to make it shocking, then make it the best piece you've ever made in your entire life. So I don't have to talk about why it's crooked and it's not well painted, but there's something, erotic on it.
Yeah.
I don't care about that. That's not interesting. But if it's really well done, then, okay, you want to make a statement, you want to do something personal or political or social or sexual or whatever. Even then, I guess, we'll see what happens.
Yeah, as long as you put all the effort and creativity you can.
Make it the best thing ever.
Yeah.
I mean, let me talk about what you're thinking. Don't make me talk about why your pot isn't perfect.
And I always find it exciting as a gallerist when somebody brings in something like that that's really out of what they've been normally doing.
You say that until they arrive with something totally crazy.
There are some times, yeah, you're right about that, actually. I'll give one example. Dennis Zeminski brought in a Navajo a painting. He's a great artist, really wonderful painting. In fact, the painting behind us is a Dennis Zeminski, and he brought in this Navajo guy with a tuba. He painted a Navajo playing a tuba. I thought, Dennis, I don't think I can sell this. I know it's just so incongruent. And he goes, oh, no, it's a great thing. You'll be fine. And I'm trying to think how I can repaint it. Maybe you can make it into a sun face somehow. And no, I did sell it. It took a while, but I sold it to a tuba player.
There you go.
So I guess
everything has a home.
There are sometimes you get things you go, I don't know.
I think I think what you did is what I tried to. You have respect for the artist, and you think, they did the thing. Did good work on it.
It was a beautiful painting, no doubt.
And that's the whole thing.
And he had a vision that I didn't and couldn't see it.
And so sometimes it's,
And I let it go. I said, let's try it. We'll see.
And we have to sort of open our minds. I mean, we can be as bad as everybody else. And,
Yeah.
So I think it's great when artists come in and they just kind of like force us to rethink our position on, what we think is saleable or not. Because I think it takes us out of being just marketeers. We're not just salespeople. We're not just that then we really are helping to promote the art and be part of the art scene. And I think, be part of the art community and let artists have their expression.
Yeah, and I think that both of us are that way.
Absolutely. I think you do that all the time.
Less important. It's more about promoting the art, enjoying the art, and we come from a collector's basis. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah, I think that's education. I mean, Richard would have said that, and I think that he probably drilled it into both of us.
Yeah, he did.
And both of us being collectors, I think, forces that education side, right? When you're collecting yourself, you want to know all of that.
Yeah, I come from my folks were teachers, professors, and you teach. Now I have one last question for you before we wrap this up. Tell me about your shoes. Because we both have this thing about shoes. I got great shoes. Yeah,
You have usually almost as good as shoes as I do.
Okay. Wait, you got to come to my opening. I've saved some that haven't even been seen before.
I'm going to see the
What
next
is it with us and shoes? I don't know.
My theory is that I don't really know how to dress well, but if I wear good shoes, it distracts everything.
Well, the next time you go visit Charles King at one of his galleries, either in Santa Fe or Phoenix, Scottsdale, not Phoenix.
Thank you.
A great gallery, actually. Make sure you check out his shoes, because that's the first thing I always look at when I come in and say, what has he got on? Yeah, and he had some nice ones today. I didn't.
Keep working on it.
But I will. Thank you, Charles King.
Thank you very much, Mark.
Really appreciate you having you come on, sharing your wisdom. Very interesting.
Thanks.
Thanks.